Constitutional Conversations is a series of discussions by America's leading scholars about the principles, framing, ratification, and implementation of constitutional government in the United States. This series is hosted by the James Madison Memorial Fellowship Foundation of Alexandria, Virginia.
How many books are out there about texts? Not so many, and many of them were models for me. Well, Pauline Maier writes a book, American Scripture, about the Declaration of Independence. Gary Wills writes a book about the Constitution itself, explaining America, about the Declaration of Independence, inventing America. The Gettysburg book is a book all about this iconic text, Lincoln at Gettysburg, and he was kind enough, Wills was, to write a blurb for this book. So yes, I thought a lot about what other books are actually explicating text as opposed to doing other things. One final thing on Gary Wills and his influence on me. I have these heroes and heroines, Pauline Maier, Gordon Wood, Bernard Bailyn, Ed Morgan, and I don't agree with all of them on everything, but I'm taking seriously their themes and their templates. But this is a book not just about words, but about images. It's about a democratic culture. So it's about, for example, political cartoons and how Ben Franklin invents the world's first one, Join or Die. And it becomes, in effect, a viral meme, the first world's a hashtag, because it goes around the world again and again and again, Join or Die. The Brits engage with it. It moves from Philadelphia up to Boston, down to the Southland. It's 1754 when Franklin, who was a newspaper publisher, first publishes this thing. Gets a second life in 1760s and a third life in the 1770s. So we talk ourselves into a kind of continental consciousness, nationhood, and we do it not just with iconic texts like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, these words, but conversations about these texts and pamphlets like the Federalist Papers, but most important of all, perhaps, newspapers. America's Constitution is created in a newspaper culture. So this is all, and newspapers are about words, but they're also about images like political cartoons. Democratic medium for a democratic culture. Everyone reads newspapers in America, and there are more newspapers than anyone else. Let me say it one final way. Here are the big six framers by acclamation. And they're all featured in the book. It's going to tell you about ordinary people, but also about the leaders. I'll mention Madison, because of course this is the Madison Center. I'm going to be talking about whether he really was the father of the Constitution or not. But by acclamation, you've got Madison and Washington and Jefferson and John Adams and Alexander Hamilton and Ben Franklin. Those are the big six. That's not just my take. I think that pretty much most historians and ordinary Americans, I think if you did a Family Feud poll or something, name an important founder or something, those would be your top six. They're all newspaper men in one way or another. Ben Franklin is a printer. That's where he makes his fortune. He's Rupert Murdoch. Thomas Jefferson is going to create this newspaper. He's going to use newspapers for his to create a kind of political party like Fox News Network, a series of affiliated newspapers.
Though never write a piece himself, always through his surrogates.
Oh, enter James Madison, who actually, Jefferson says, for God's sakes, man, take up your pen, go after Hamilton, cut him to ribbons in the press, okay? So, but Jefferson does write an important pamphlet in 1770s about a summary view of American rights, and the Declaration of Independence is written to be reprinted in newspapers, but yes, Madison, as Publius. Hamilton's first big break in life is actually a newspaper piece about a hurricane in the tropics. He's going to engage Madison in the press later on. The Helvidius Pacificist debates and all the rest. So he's a newspaper man, start to finish, under all sorts of pseudonyms. John Adams is Humphrey Plowjogger and Novanglis, and he's a newspaper guy. Now, Washington, you might think, is a little different. He doesn't write lots of newspaper essays, but here's the point. In the 1750s, he actually writes a journalistic account of his adventures in the West, and they're gripping and they're serialized in newspapers up and down the continent by people like Ben Franklin. Washington is world famous for his military and frontier exploits. World famous at age 22 because of American newspapers, and he reads more American newspapers than anyone, and he's always acutely aware of his image in the newspapers. And if you ask, for example, how Donald Trump became president, because I wondered this, because I think he doesn't have the conventional background of military service or diplomatic service. Oh, but he was in all the newspapers in his 20s, now maybe for other exploits. But it turns out, actually, if you want to be president of all America, it's helpful to have actually your name be a household name. And George Washington's was, to repeat, at age 22. So all of the big six are products and children and sires of America's early newspaper culture.